Welcome. I'm Kelly Stretz, a customer success manager on the SmartLink team. I'm here today to discuss Coinbase's secret to rapid global growth with Coinbase's very own Michelle Wu. Michelle, you play a huge role in the localization translation process at Coinbase, which has experienced rapid growth in the last year. So I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself. And can you please share with us what's unique about Coinbase's approach to localization and translation?
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. I'm Michelle. As Kelly mentioned, I lead localization for Coinbase. It's a really fascinating world that we've entered when it comes to both crypto and localization. I joined Coinbase about 3.5 years ago, back when crypto was a little bit of a newer thing. For those of you who are familiar with the Bitcoin landscape, Bitcoin had dropped down to $3,000 at the time. And so very different world that we live in now, especially when we think about global expansion and international strategy across languages, locales, and regions. I think the really interesting world that we've entered when it comes to localization is how do we do that at scale with the complexities of an industry like crypto, which is being defined and evolving as we speak, maybe even by the hour, in terms of what terminology are we using on the English side to describe crypto concepts, and then how do we actually translate it in a way that fits multiple markets that require understanding. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I do see localization as being the key to access a larger financial, economic environment that crypto often provides people.
Thanks, Michelle. So building off of that, where do you begin approaching translating a language that's taking on new English meanings literally every day? And how does SmartLink help you tackle that complexity?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to start with, primarily because it's not too different when you think about the basics. So when you think about the basics and foundational concepts that are needed for localization, it is the same to start with any industry, much less crypto. The only difference is that when we think about these basics like glossaries, style guides, all these standard components that are needed to run a really thriving, quality, strong localization program, we take an additional layer to it. And that additional layer is a heavy hand of crypto. What I mean by that is making sure that our glossaries and terminology have an additional layer for crypto jargon, crypto understandings. For example, let's take a really commonplace word that we generally probably would know of, which is the word wallet. When you think of wallet, there's like a tangible item that is a wallet, but there's also a slightly different definition when it comes to what a wallet means in the crypto world. How do you then translate that into different languages, especially when their version of a wallet has different connotations? So it's really about recognizing what's new and evolving in the space, so that we can make sure that like our industry standards, expectations, go out the window a little bit when it comes to crypto, but we're still really honing back in on these basics. I think really interesting example that we recently came across was when we were translating a large product into Tagalog for the Philippine market. And how do we ensure that we are striking the right percentage of Taglish, which is a combination of Tagalog and English, versus more formal language parameters when you have a crypto industry that needs to speak to new incoming users who are newer to this landscape, but then also what I like to jokingly call like the Gen Z world, who like kind of understands crypto terminology right away. How do you cater to those two user groups in a completely different language? When you think about keys to success, it's having tools like SmartLink really be part of that ride to ensure that we have like a centralization of these core basic components, making sure that we have alignment when it comes to our glossaries and style guides, and then all of our vendors can work out of the same source of truth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But taking a step back, can you tell us a little bit about your globalization strategy and how this is being executed at scale?
Yeah, Coinbase's overall mission has always been about, access to crypto. And, to do that, we need to have a global strategy that's in line with that overarching mission to increase economic freedom. And it's really no different when it comes to localization and translation. It's making sure that, our content, however we write it initially, however we want it to be presented to users, is translated in a way that makes that experience really clear and usable. Having that, economic freedom through crypto is really only possible if you have access to information and access to that experience and the ability to actually utilize the right tools like Coinbase to trade crypto, to be able to dive into this new world. And the one way to do that is make sure that our translated content is super comprehensible, really easy to understand, speaks to that native user wherever they may be in the world. I think in an ideal world, we would create mini versions of every product and every company in that language and that country that's crafted in every single possible way from the ground up for every single user that exists. That is probably like the least scalable way to do things. So we won't be doing that. But at the end of the day, we do, lean heavily on, multiple vendors similar to Smartling as well. Language vendors that can understand crypto to ensure that we really get that usable experience for everyone in the world.
Yeah. And you've already gone into some of the challenges that you've faced up into this point, but can we dig into that a little bit deeper? And can you tell us more about challenges that Coinbase faces during the localization process?
Yeah, to start, we do face the same challenges as any other industry or company when it comes to localization. I think there's always going to be an evolving need for advocacy and education around why localization matters. It's not just translation. There's so many nuanced aspects to this work that I think makes it really powerful. But one of the biggest challenges and joys that I have talked about, but will always continue to talk about, is that crypto aspect. And it makes it, I think, the most fun part about coming into work, but also the most challenging part of getting things right. When you think about, crypto jargon, especially in like the marketing space, where transcreation is already difficult to do, marketing translation is a whole new way of translating content. Then you add in crypto memes. How do you translate HODL? How do you translate, even some of the more cultural aspects of crypto specifically, and then add in the cultural nuances that are needed for that given market and have it be relevant and not exclusionary in any sense, but also still really true to crypto's personality and nature. I think the trickiness here is Coinbase is a leader in this space. And so there's a lot of pressure for us to get this right for users. A lot of people look our way in terms of defining, not just even, on translated content, but even on the English side, to define some of these crypto terms in a comprehensible, like consumable manner for our users. I know journalists, can often look at our content as well and understand, like, okay, this is the way like the industry is talking about it because Coinbase as a leader is leading that charge. So we do feel a lot of pressure to get this right. And I can't promise that we get it right 100% of the time, but we certainly try our best to do that.
Yeah. On the other side of the coin, what are some successes that you've achieved at Coinbase?
Yeah, great question, Kelly. And this is definitely, I think, a good question to talk through how Smartling was also really helpful for us as well. We recently translated a project into 21 different languages and did it remarkably quickly. I think something within, a month and a half to 2 months, inclusive of, LQA. And a lot of our LQA is done generally with some internal linguists that have a crypto background. But in this case, we went with some vendors that were specialized in crypto translations, and that was really helpful. And that's a remarkable amount of agility. I mean, I won't speak to the word volume, but it was really, really high in terms of what was coming in, the complexity that was needed. It was a combination of strings and marketing material as well. And we were able to do that in a really short amount of time. And frankly, that type of agility is not really possible without centralization of a lot of those core components I mentioned earlier. And so doing it with vendors we trust and having a partnership where, our vendors, like Kelly, who's an incredible partner with us, to say, okay, these are the issues that are popping up that we're not, aware of. How do we solve this really, really quickly? Because we need to move really quickly to get this launch out the window.
Well, that's kind of you to say. And thanks for bringing up LQA as well. I know that's a tool that a lot of our customers have been really excited about. So what's next for Coinbase? I think a lot of people, in the conference today are probably wondering that as well.
Yeah, there are two things that our program really, really cares about at the end of the day, and it's going to be always quality and delivery. But specific to the future of our language localization efforts, we're always going to concentrate on quality first in terms of the language output, and making sure that we're able to deliver that first in class experience, in all facets, all of our products that our customer can potentially use, whether it's like our help center articles or our learn pages, and making sure that the language in them matters. And so we'll be taking a look at our existing processes and our frameworks and making sure that we're staying as up to date and innovative in our way of thinking, when it comes to delivering that quality. So, a lot of the normal standards that I think exist in the localization, industry may need to be completely rethought, when it comes to a combination of different vendor types, how we even work agilely in this industry, given how quickly crypto changes. Even the cadence at which that we update our glossaries or how we even think about our glossaries needs to be rethought with that crypto element in mind. And so that's really the future of, I guess, this localization program for Coinbase is how do we stay up to date with a really strong amount of repeatable innovation.
Well, thank you for answering my questions, Michelle. I know that everyone watching probably has some questions for you as well. So I'll just ask everyone, if you have any questions for Michelle, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A, and we'll use the last few minutes of this session here to address some of those. So I see one here. Michelle, to what degree, if any, has using SmartLink facilitated your company's ability to maintain any compliance requirements?
Great question for whoever asked that. As you can imagine, crypto is a highly, compliant, regulated industry, and one of the things that we care about the most is making sure that we are truly compliant with what we do. Let's take a market like Japan, where there's really high levels of compliance. Having centralization of our core components like glossaries, style guides, mostly around the terminology, ensures that we're not, mistranslating things and not redefining things in a way that would make us non-compliant when it comes to our language and our copy.
Yeah, it looks like there's a follow-up question on that, is whether you prepare separate English content for each market for compliance, or how do you handle it overall?
Yeah, so it really depends on the given product and feature. We have an incredible team of UX writers who really do think through the source content creation process and how do we do that, one at scale, but also with those nuances needed for the market. So that was a very long, rambly way to say, yes, we do prepare specialized, nuanced content that is specific to each market, especially taking into account regulatory requirements to ensure that we are compliant. And then that's one layer on the source content side. And then when we actually put it through the translation process, we also ensure that we have another layer of compliance requirements that are put into place for terminology. How do we talk about things, making sure that we work with the right legal and compliance stakeholders on our end to ensure that all of our content is up to code, so to speak.
Great. I see another one here. Let me know if you're able to speak to this one. A question: how can one obtain the knowledge in crypto localization? Obviously, it's very specialized, as you mentioned earlier, as both a project manager or a translator.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer this specific to like the combination of like crypto and localization as like a world and field. I would almost want to say specifically, crypto in itself as a starting point is really easy to dive in. There's so much content out there that there's a plethora of it that I can see where it can be a little intimidating. I might be a little bit biased, but I highly recommend that if you are interested in getting a little bit of a basic starter pack, heading over to Coinbase's Learn Articles. It's really easy to we have a lot of wonderful videos that actually make it easy to consume some crypto knowledge. And you can just start by understanding some of the more basics of crypto. And I find that a lot of that inherent crypto background comes hand in hand when working with localization. It's no different than thinking about language overall. When you understand what crypto language and content is included, it kind of ends up folding itself into localization. And, just to help out with that context, the internal linguists that we have that are dedicated to different languages that we looked for with a crypto background, we weren't looking for necessarily with someone with a professional experience in crypto. That's kind of hard to find since it's a newer field. But it's someone who has a really deep interest in crypto, who had read up on their own, had maybe used Coinbase before, understood some of those nuances. So it wasn't completely fresh and brand new when they were actually doing their localization work.
Don't know if we have time for one last question. Are there terms or words that you keep in English across all markets due to the nature of the crypto industry?
Yes, we actually just had a very robust conversation around what terms we need to keep in English versus not. I think NFT is a really great example of one that we would keep in its one acronym and first and in its English. Non-fungible token as a full blown out phrase is not very usable in English, much less in another language. And so there are words similar to that that we think through and try to keep its original usage and term. I think there are some crypto memes that also are only really resonating for a given market. So we try to keep those in English if we are going to use them.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Michelle, so much for your time today. I know another session's coming up, so that's a wrap, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Kelly.